Hello, everyone. Sorry to have kept you waiting, but as they say, it's always good to be fashionably late. Although that wasn't our intention. Our intention was to wait for the whole group to be here before we start. So we're very happy to have you all with us, whether it's early in the morning or in the afternoon or in the evening, wherever you are. It's lovely to have all of us together here again one more time in celebration of our forthcoming issue. Now, this is just a little sneak peek on the poetry that you are expecting, that you will expect to see in the forthcoming issue, but there's a lot more wonderful fiction and nonfiction also coming your way. We will be celebrating those in other independent events later on at the end of January and early February. So the theme, as you all know, the theme is escapism. And why did we think of such a theme for this new issue? It's because this is what many of us are feeling at the moment. I mean, there's so much going on in the world, and we do want to escape, not just reality, but we want to escape the present. People who are far away from loved ones are finding themselves relishing in memories or dreaming of a future where they could get together again. And those of you who were stuck, for example, like me, and not able to travel, you weren't able to travel, you probably know what I'm talking about. Or if you have family members that are abroad and, you know, those big family reunions that you probably are used to, they no longer happen this year because of obvious reasons. Anyway, thanks to technology and this digital literary world that is now rapidly emerging, people are still turning up at such events, sometimes in tens, sometimes in hundreds. We have 90 people who have registered for tonight's event. Hopefully they would all show up. But people are showing up for the poetry, and they are here for it. And this is because this is the time for the making and consuming of literature, because let's face it, we need it. We need it for solace, for understanding, and for comfort. More people are wanting it, and more people are able to receive it now and engage in it because of the boundary breaking that it gives. So, and because social distancing, you know, it's not a big issue when it comes to digital literary events, because, well, we're all in different places around the world anyway, but we cut ourselves a small slice of cyberspace where we could all meet and engage and interact in real time. So I'm very happy once more that we are all here tonight, and we will be doing the following. So each poet will be reading one poem, one of the poems that will appear in the journal. And after that, there will be some time for discussion, for giving your comments and anything else you would like to say or talk about with the poets. Feel free to use the chat box if you would like to write something that you want us to address later on during the Q&A. And also, please feel free to use the microphone if you are asked to use it later on once we read your questions or comments in the chat box. If there's anything that you would like to ask about in terms of, for example, timing or anything else, please, again, send me a message on the chat box. Now, one very nice phenomena that is kind of catching fire right now in this new digital literary time. Well, you know how in open mic nights, people snap their fingers or clap. You snap your fingers while the poet is reading, and then you clap when you like what you heard. So unfortunately, we cannot unmute all of us at the same time because this would be chaotic. So I would like to ask you to use the hashtag for the clap and the star sign for if you feel like snapping your fingers. So please feel free to do that. Feel free to show your enthusiasm and give us your opinions on the wonderful poetry that we will be hearing tonight. So without further ado, we would like to start with our first poet for tonight. David James? David? Okay. So David has taught college writing, literature, and peacemaking for 35 years and lives in the woods near Sagatuck, Michigan. Poems and prose have appeared in a variety of journals and anthologies. His latest of 8 poetry collections are If God Were Gentle by Dos Madres Press and Surreal Expulsion by the Poetry Box. The micro chapbook, All Her Jazz, is free and downloadable for folding at the Origami Poems Project. And a new chapbook, Flip Requiem, will be released in spring 2020. I believe it's released already, right, David?
Yes.
Okay. So you would probably like to share the link with us in the chat box so that our audience may want to access the book.
All right, if I'm okay. Sure.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Rula. I appreciate it very much. And thanks to the rest of you, especially my peeps. I'm not exactly sure who's here, but I've got peeps all over the US at various time zones. But thank you very much. Maybe later, text or email me so that I know you were there. I'd really appreciate it. I am going to read a poem from a long time ago, actually. And when I read it, I'm going to share the screen because I think it's kind of fun to see a poem while the writer reads. I wrote this while living solo in a cabin on Lake Michigan in a very down time for me. And the only source of heat was a wood fireplace. And so there's a reference to that. So I'm going to show you the poem. I practiced this already. Here it is. Look at that. Are you seeing it?
Yes. No.
Okay, thank you. All right. So this poem is called For Therapy by Mixed Metaphors. And at the time, it was a way for me to escape from my blues. And I just had a feeling that they weren't going to last. For therapy, I mix metaphors. From a frozen wedge of machine split pine, tossed on this settling fire, one frayed, martyred fiber curls back and away like a wire, then flares, a flame racing the length of a fuse. Imagine this my innermost strand, a barely dirt 2-track off Frost Road less traveled, a thin, trembling thread of desire, the uncharted blue vein of a tundral highway. Or in some dread cloister, it dreams, and a sillier spirit suddenly moves, like 4 fresh fingers over flamenco frets, like dumb elegance speaking old Florentine, never meaning one of its singing words. It might dance, Tahana, Zydeco, any 20 Liebeslieder waltzes, any juking jumble of the barrel house blues, wherever rose an arousing tune, the thrum of a Kenyan drumming, the merest notion of Motown soul. I do know there must be this lost but lively chord, an original nerve, perhaps abandoned or jammed as if into an airless cavity of my old house. It waits to spark, to catch, its insulated nest punctured by the stray tip of a driven nail, craving some risky remodeling, that annoying era of air compressor, plaster grit, dumpster, and the exuberant exhalation of ancient dust.
Beautiful.
Voila.
Lovely.
Thank you so much, David.
Beautiful. I love the alliteration. I think the alliteration is wonderful. It draws you into the poem. Marvelous.
That's my thing, Bernard.
Well, it's beautiful. It's beautifully,
Thank you.
beautifully put together. I love it.
Thank you so much. So next, we have Bernard Pearson, who is joining us from the UK, from England. Bernard Pearson's work appears in many publications, including Aesthetica magazine, the Edinburgh Review, Crossways, the Gentian, Nymphs, the Poetry Village, Beneath the Fever, the Beach Hut, Little Stone. In 2017, a selection of his poetry in Free Fall was published by Leaf Press. In 2019, he won second prize in the Aurora Prize for Writing for his poem Manor Farm. He is also a biographer and prize-winning short story writer. It's an honor to have you with us tonight, Bernard. And the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. It's my honor to be here. And what's so beautiful to me, I live in a little town that it is very much mono-ethnic. So it's lovely to be among so many different cultures. I used to live in Newport, which was a very multicultural city. And I miss that feeling of what we were talking about melting pots and meeting people with different experiences. So it's wonderful to be here with you. The poem I'm going to read is a very short poem. It's a simple little poem. And I wrote it some time ago. I do write about nature quite a lot, the natural world. I also write political stuff, but there are lots of people writing good political stuff. And, you know, so I feel that that's fairly well covered. So a lot of my poetry is either personal or spiritual, or it's about the natural world. So this poem is called On the Return of the Butterfly. Badging buds, identifying each one for beauty, blending the gentle warming air by its wing beat. Like a feathered paper fan in a French salon, raising the temperature of the day. Peacocks, Picasso blue, across a ruddied canvas, unfurl as flags on the field of the cloth of gold. While in the westering wind, a bundle of cabbage whites, humble like untimely snowflakes, then dance up towards the sun, newly allowed to stay up late to watch this silent insurrection. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing this with us tonight.
My pleasure.
And next up, we have Professor Claude Barb, who is joining us from Chicago. Claude is a full professor at the Chicago School of Professional Psychology. He is an author of many prize-winning articles, books, and poetry. He is a multiple-time nominee and multiple-time recipient of the International Gradiva Award presented by the National Association for the Advancement of Psychoanalysis. And he has received many other prizes and awards as well. Professor Barb's clinical and research interests focus on foster care, psychology and religion, contemplative psychology, critical psychology, psychology and the arts, and the integration of therapeutic approaches to cultural and global perspectives. He has written numerous reviews and review essays on art, photography, literature, film, and music. He is also a published songwriter. And Professor Barb has interviewed clowns and musicians at the Lincoln Center in New York City. He has sold children's books door to door in rural Oklahoma, scrubbed pots for several years at a soup kitchen in Manhattanville, grew a large garden that the birds and deer consumed, worked as a chaplain on the ER midnight shift, all important training prerequisites to becoming a psychologist and psychotherapist. All in all, Professor Barb is a very interesting person, one of the smartest people and the most creative people that you may ever meet. Thank you for joining us tonight, Professor Barb, and without further ado, please
go
ahead with the poem.
Thank you very much for that introduction. It's a kind of a self-inventory of an attempt to have a lived life in many ways, which I think I wrote that trying to encourage psychology students to be interdisciplinary and bring their their own lives into their work. And so it is with my poetry. I'm going to read a poem that will be in the upcoming issue. And it's my escape to the mountains and the Catskills when I lived in New York. The name of the poem is Henry's Orchard. Orion tracks the lion stars above a field of scrub and stone. One side of mountain is the face his hunter's killing calm reflects into a single eye of pond. The other side is middle night, and cold dispersions of a dew, an early frost will constellate, and by such alchemy construe the earth's elusive transience that nature shapes. We climb the hill beyond the bracken wood that bounds the heavy yields of harvest boughs, and drink a sky of apple air with eyes and breath and heart until our bodies seem to grow to ground and mean to stay. But night has old designs to play. Here are the proud, about to fall in patterns drawn across the spider's universe. Here are the russets aged to rust, where cloyed and bitter sweetness drove the heavy laden bees to dance their divinations branch by branch. So prospers our diminishment. And as the brails of dust ascribe the season's final chronicles, we trace the points of dying stars dissolving down in early east, as though configured in their fall. A neighbor dressed in overalls is turning from a ladder perch to wave us from the road and talk. Yet go our way, the taste for more, a sweeter wind between the teeth, and take our days as portion lots with bright pretensions of a past set high as fixed mythologies.
Wonderful. That was fabulous. Thank you so much, Claude, for sharing.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Noor Rahana. Noor, who is joining us from Dubai. Are you there, Noor?
Hi. Hello.
Hi, Noor. Hello. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Noor, I don't have your bio, but I can introduce you as one of the most creative students in AUD. Noor has also won awards for her architectural genius, and she's currently now a master's student. Did I get that right?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, no, I just want to say that I really adore writing, and I feel like it's means for me to escape whatever we're living, and it's a great way to express yourself. So yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us here. I know you have a class in like a few minutes.
Yeah,
so
I do.
Thank you for being able to make it.
Thank you so much.
All right, so take it away.
Okay, just a quick introduction to the poem. It's so ever since I was 5 years old, I was trained professionally in ballet and ballroom dancing, and ever since then, I was dance has been a major part of my life, and it has helped me cope with whatever we are going through and with whatever Lebanon's going through at the moment. So it's a means of escape, and it's a great way to express yourself physically. So this poem is called Motion Equals Emotion. I dance to feel free. I dance to gaze off to another universe, one that holds me captive and wishes never to let me go. I dance to hold on to whatever makes me alive, to preserve the last drops of my blood, sweat, and tears that help me reach my ultimate potential and become the person I have always wanted to be. I dance to feel free, and I dance to gaze off to another universe, to connect, to feel, to pray perhaps, to trust that the universe is with me, in me. I dance to open my heart and to live open-heartedly, because motion equals emotion. In the end, with every inch of me, I say this: dance is my beginning, my end, and everything in between. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Noor. Thank you so much. And next, we will move to Steve. Steve Pottinger, who is joining us also from the UK. Many of you might know Steve from the previous open mic session and from the poetry evening, the wonderful poetry evening that he gave us a few weeks ago. So Steve is a poet, author, and workshop facilitator, and a founding member of Wolverhampton Arts Collective, Poets, Prattlers, and Pandemonialists. He's an engaging and accomplished performer whose work has appeared in magazines and anthologies, and he's a regular contributor to online poetry platforms. He's performed at Ledbury and Stanza Poetry Festivals, at the Edinburgh Free Fringe, and in venues the length and breadth of the country from Penzance up to Orkney. His 6th volume of poems, 31 Small Acts of Love and Resistance, is out now and published by Ignite Books. So, Steve, are you there, Steve?
I'm here.
Oh,
yeah.
There you are. Okay, now I see you. All right, Steve, welcome back. It's great to have you with us again. And take it away.
Thank you. Thanks, Rula, and thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to read a poem again for you. This poem is called Dreamtime. It was commissioned by an arts organisation here in the West Midlands in England in the first lockdown. And with this one, I was looking at the way that the fact that we couldn't go to work and couldn't socialise, how that affected our sense of identity perhaps. But also there was a very commonly expressed response to that situation, which was people finding themselves in some way feeling more connected with nature. So I was looking at both of those. 2 months in, he can barely remember a time before, has pared life back to weekly shop, the bins, a newspaper that yellows on the kitchen table, puzzles half finished, headlines unread. He sleeps late, wakes early, snoozes in the afternoon, his hours, it seems, all out of season, the structure of his life dissolving like tissue paper in long-awaited rain, lacking any rhyme or reason. He talks to ghosts, swears he rolls over in bed and finds the weight and heat of her there, reaches out to nothing but cold memory, switches the light on, creaks downstairs, stands in the back door letting the night in and waits for sunrise. By day, he shares crumbs with the blackbird and robin who come into his kitchen for food, names them, tells them stories of his childhood, chuckles, of course, that were before your time, is rewarded with birdsong. Twice, he snapped to, standing at the window, clasping a mug of sugared tea he can't recall making and wouldn't drink for the life of him, has poured it away, boiled the kettle for coffee, found himself later sipping once more sugared tea. Those first long ago weeks he thirsted for the bar, for evenings marked by the smooth glide of a pint. Now he watches bees get drunk on nectar, loses himself in the slow rhythm of poppies opening and the antics of squirrels. In the early hours, alert and sleepless. He walks the town as street lights click off one by one beside him, holds his breath as the dog fox trots home to curl and snooze and dream. So close, he can hear the pad, pad, pad of paw on pavement. In the east, colour starts to bleed into the sky. He wonders if he'll ever quite return from this new normal. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steve. This is actually a poem that we read together in my literature class as a contemporary poem that is from the heart of the moment and that we can relate to one way or the other in terms of the pandemic and lockdown and the things that we are all going through collectively. Thank you very much for sharing it, Steve. And next I will move to Sam. Sam is joining us tonight for the first time in our open mic evenings. Sam is a 24-year-old poet, translator, and musician from Damascus, Syria. He fled Syria in late 2015 due to governmental and societal issues. He is based in Berlin, Germany, where he is currently finalizing a degree in humanities, the arts, and social thought at Barb College, Berlin. His work in music, Syrian metal, has been previously covered by several international magazines such as Vice and Rolling Stone Middle East. His poetry has been featured in the discussion series Real Talk, hosted by Barb College Berlin and the Berliner, okay, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, is it Volksbund? Sam?
Volksbund.
Okay. Sam will soon be published by the German magazine Weiter Schreiben, and thereafter appearing on Art TV's program Twist to discuss poetry and music. Welcome on board, and the floor is yours, Sam. We can't wait to hear your lovely poem.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be among such a great assembly of poets, especially being an up-and-coming poet myself. This is a great chance. This poem is called Hazy Gaze, and it's pretty much speaking to the notion of escapism. A lot of people escape into nature. I escape into my own head. And so this is an exercise in that. Hazy Gaze. The great brown mountaintops were melting into meadows and rigid plains overflowing with their own substance in a thick stream growing thicker under the heat. A great scythe in the sky unraveled more of the earth and dug deeper into its roots, reducing the very soul to the heap of lumpy mud whence they came. The sky was lit by luminous eyes, projecting light rays as plenty as days. And there upon each perched a songless deformity, meddling with what it lit. Now, what if the scythe were my tablespoon, the mountaintops were on my plate, and it were a plastic plateau? Were these eyes mine, they would not shine. Only see and suspect a gateway to introspect. What if the earth were my foregone lover or my mother? What if it were chocolate, this liquid subject and hazy object I nigh perceive? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you, that was very lovely. Next, we will move to Mariam Al-Bastaki. Mariam?
Hi.
Hi, Mariam. So, Mariam is a young Emirati poet and writer with a bachelor's degree in business management and a minor in English literature from the American University in Dubai. She specializes in poetry. Her work, My Dear and Kiss, were previously published in Cinnamon Press poetry magazine, Envoi. Her poems are scattered pieces of herself, Stories stemmed from other stories. Having played the violin from the age of 7, Maryam is an admirer of all forms of art. She aspires to create imaginary realms that touch readers and inspire them to connect with their own deeply rooted, complex emotions. And she does a great job at that too. Thank you for joining us tonight, Maryam. We're very happy to have you here.
I'm currently stuck with poems. I'm not sure which one I should go for, so I wanted your opinion. Should I go for Trails of Little Ghost Feet or Vincent?
Vincent. I mean, they're both lovely, but let's do something ekphrastic.
All right. So this poem, the poem I'm going to read right now is called When Are We to Meet, Vincent? And I would say I personally love Vincent van Gogh, even though I've never met him. And there is so much about his life that interests me and his work. So, and I just feel like he was too good for this world. And so in this poem, I mean, it's pretty dark, but I'm asking him, when am I going to see him? Soon. Anyway, so I'm going to read this epigraph, okay, that he wrote to his brother in a letter. So, the sight of the stars always makes me dream in as simple a way as the black spots on the map, representing towns and villages, make me dream. Why, I say to myself, should the spots of light in the firmament be less accessible to us than the black spots on the map of France? Right. So this was what he said to his brother in a letter. Now my poem. I spend nights awake till the breath of dawn's light, my favorite shade of night, slowly vanishing from the painted smooth paper-like canvas. It is then myself draws away from living and rests into the notion of peace, into perhaps nothing. Years ago, in the evenings where I felt most alone, my heart had found a wonder of little specks, of little friends. So every hours after sunset, I would sit beneath a deep, dark sapphire, and little gems pinned onto the heavens, some close, some scattered. I would gaze at the sky and count the many of them, and smile at the beaming ones watching over. The world would finally sit still, quiet, and I would hear myself, a throbbing sound from inside, a gentle breeze, and its whisper from tender, parted flesh, a silent cry that only the heavens and people in the sky could hear. How I wish I could caress the little shimmering stars, the friends I could not have here.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was lovely.
Wonderful. That was lovely indeed. Thank you so much, Maryam. Thank you. And next, we have a small musical break with Danya. Danya, are you there? Danya will be singing her poem to us. And I can't see you, Danya.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah. Right. So, Danya, what's the title of your song?
It's Dreaming of Sleep.
Okay. All right. And Danya is an aspiring screenwriter studying digital production and storytelling at the American University in Dubai. In her free time, she enjoys writing songs in combination with original poems to accompany her guitar playing hobby. Her writings mainly explore themes of questioning identity and toxic self-criticism. Danya, I'm sure we will love this, as usual. So go ahead.
Thank you so much, Professor. So this poem is an interesting combination of, I think, both of those themes I included for my bio, as well as dealing with the matter of escapism for this whole issue. The poem is titled Dreaming of Sleep, so I think that's already an interesting approach to talking about it. The poem is actually something I wrote as a process of exploring a way of writing stream of consciousness. I wrote it in one go all together and then made it a song. And it was essentially just me feeling like I was really tired of everything, but I also couldn't really get a chance to actually sleep, which is what I really wanted to do. And it was also dealt a little bit with my thoughts on procrastination and feeling like I don't even really deserve that chance sometimes because I'm not doing well enough. And I think it's very interesting and hopefully very captivating to the audience with some of its lines. So I'm just gonna quickly set up my guitar here. Can you hear it?
Yep.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Feeling rather anxious now, I let myself lay down. I think I've gone too heavy now. I think I'll go lay down. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. And everybody's asking how, so I'll just turn around. I can't breathe my own thoughts this loud. I think I start to drown. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in a better mood. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in her bed. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. See, I've got my work cut out, I'd rather cut it down. I know that I should do it out, it hurts just to sit down. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. You might just die if you try quite hard enough, darling. You got no right to survive, and that's why you're still crawling. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in a better mood. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in her bed. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. You might just die if you try quite hard enough, darling. You got no right to survive, and that's why you're still crawling. You might just die if you try quite hard enough, darling. You got no right to survive, and that's why you're still crawling. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. What you're doing day and night, doing nothing, she's so bright. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in a better mood. I'll tell you what she's up to when she's in her bed. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep. Everything that I see, I just wanna go to sleep. Everything that I see makes me wanna go to sleep.
Very good.
Wonderful, Danya. Beautiful voice, beautiful music, beautiful song. It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you so much. Before we start the second half of our evening, I would like to give 5 minutes of a break, just enough to make another mug of tea, or just stretch your legs, have a little break, and then we will come back. So I would just ask you to mute your mics, and if you want, switch off the cameras, and we'll be back in 5 minutes sharp. Okay, thank you all again for all the wonderful contributions and all the wonderful poetry.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so here we are again. I will read the list of our next poets. We will start with Laurette Luzajic, Christine Murray, Omar Sabah, Perla Cantarjian, Hadi Habra, Alan Hickman, Frank Darwish, and Carly Brown. So, next up, we have Laurette. Laurette, are you here?
I am here.
All right, there you are. So, Laurette regularly contributes to the journal with her wonderful art, photography, and poems as well. It's always a great honor having Laurette with us. Laurette is an award-winning mixed media artist whose collage paintings have been shown in galleries, museums, restaurants, nightclubs, banks, cafes, hotels, laundromats, billboards, reality TV, magazine ads, and more. Her work has been collected in Canada and in at least 25 countries around the world. Laurette is also a widely published writer whose poetry and prose has appeared in several hundred literary journals in print and online, and more than a dozen anthologies. She has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize 3 times and twice for Best of the Net, one making it to the finalists. She has written 5 collections of poetry, 2 of them entirely ekphrastic, meaning poems responding to visual art. She's founder and editor of the wonderful journal, The Ekphrastic Review, a journal devoted entirely to creative writing inspired by art. Thank you so much for joining us again, Laurette. And Laurette's latest poetry collection will also be reviewed in our forthcoming issue of the journal. I love your background, Laurette.
Thank you.
It's so colorful, artistic.
My whole apartment is my studio library, so thank you so much. Thanks so much, Rua, for having me, and it's just such a pleasure to be part of this worldwide community. I'm in Toronto, Canada this morning. My poem is called Robin Eggs, and it's inspired by a painting by the American surrealist Helen Lundeberg, and also by childhood memory, and then it's just kind of a fantasy at the same time. Robin Eggs. If you were waiting for the wind, you didn't tell me. You didn't talk about the slanting sun that fell over the heap of barn boards or the flames that took all our letters. I was the one who left, so I'm the one to blame. If I got lost in the labyrinth of landmines scattered over our city, I never said so. We both knew the unspoken things, the ghosts with the long fingers. Once we watched the mist creep under the pines, shroud the pyramids we were building. We were 11, 12, almost 13. There was a broken cassette tape heel crushed and blooming from a thistle. There were 2 blue eggs, early birds like we were, still spattered and spangled, still sheltered by that calcium call. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurette. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Chris?
Hiya.
Dean Murray is joining us tonight from Ireland. It's actually afternoon in Ireland right now. So Chris is an Irish poet and feminist who works to improve the visibility of women writers. She graduated from University College Dublin with a degree in art history and English literature. She also completed a diploma in web development from the National College of Ireland. She qualified as a stonecutter and has worked with the Office of Public Works in Ireland, where she does restoration stone, mostly in Limerick and Kerry. 2 historic sites she has worked on are Ross Castle and Artford Cathedral in County Kerry. Murray writes poetry predominantly for publication, though she has done performance poetry. In 2012, at the Bale Festival of New Music and Poetry, her poem, Lament for 3 Women's Voices, was performed. She's on the PEN International Women Writers Committee and is the social media coordinator for Irish PEN. She founded PoetHead, which is dedicated to women writers and is a member of FIRED, Irish Women Poets and the Canon. A great honor to have you with us again, Chris. And we're greatly looking forward to hearing your poem.
Thanks, Rula. Okay, so I sent Rula a series called Larry's, and it's written in gratitude to Yvonne Boland. There's 6, I think, or 7 poems in the series. So what I did for today is, they're quite short and they're imagist, is that I amalgamated Pillar and The Softening Rain, which are 2 poems, to flow into each other, and it's still quite short, so I hope that's okay. Is that all right, Rula?
Yeah, sure is.
Okay. Pillar. Raven full, haven of claw, dawn's flute song dissipates. Rise up, regain light. Dark and down, my song is more than silhouette. To bring light, light song, oh bright song, to soothe my ancients. Sing to pierce the breast, night hooks brim to split. Dawn's contraction, slow the opening, orchis white. A yellow-toned song to loosen the gum that holds Peony's ample heart. Thank you.
Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Chris. And next, Ahmad, Dr. Ahmad Sabah.
Hi, Rula. Is there any way I can get a Word doc onto the screen or not? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
What do I do?
Yeah, you can just share your screen.
How?
Okay, well.
Sorry, guys.
So,
sorry.
Yeah, no problem. See where it says share screen next to the chat box?
Wait, here we go. Share screen. Okay, so I put the Word doc first. No, okay.
Yeah, so put it on the screen first and then share it.
Okay, wait. Put it there. And tell me if this works. Wait, is this working?
No, not yet.
Okay, sorry. Okay, wait. Share. Okay, I have to click on share, I think. Is it working now?
Yeah.
It is working now.
Yeah. Okay. The only reason I insist on that is because this is, you know, as always, I tend to write poetry which only, well, not only I hope, but in general works as on the page more than, you know, as a performance. I'm not the most extroverted or dramatic of poets. So just, you know, it's just a piece that I hope is, you know, a unified block of as it were, contained sentiment. Anyway, so it's titled The Lay of the Land, and it runs like this. Look at the way the land curves here, undulant in parts, fluid and like water, but holding as well these dim and tiny crevices, where a sure foot may slip and then desist from being what it was, one sure foot of two. Look at these smallish plots I try not to use for ground, while my head, my mind, stay above it, and that, for however long they may. Look at the ways of this strange cartographer. She maps it all, and for all to see. All except for her. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thanks.
Ahmed.
Okay.
And Ahmed,
yes, I'm going to unshare. How do I unshare my screen?
Okay. It says stop sharing somewhere.
Okay. Yes. Stop sharing. Good. Okay. Oh, back.
Ahmed,
Okay,
I didn't introduce you, so allow me.
No need. I think I'm probably what's it? Not famous, but infamous probably among most of the people. So don't worry about that.
Dr. Ahmed Sabah is a widely published poet, writer, and critic. His first collection and his fourth collection are, respectively, My Only Ever Oedipal Complaint and To the Middle of Love. His fifth collection, but it was an important failure, came out at the start of 2020. His Beirut novella, Via Negativa, A Parable of Exile, was published with Licorice Fish Books in March 2016, and a riveting collection of short fictions, Die and Other Stories was released in September 2017. His Dubai novella, Minutes from the Miracle City, has already come out with Fairlight Books in July 2019, and a study of the oeuvre of Professor Fiona Sampson, For the Love of Music, has already been released very recently.
Actually, it's reading Fiona Sampson. I made it much less pretentious.
Oh, okay.
I know nothing about music. It was just more to do with the aspect of poetics. But anyway, thanks.
Fair enough. He has published scholarly essays on George Eliot, Ford, Maddox Ford, G.K. Chesterton, Henry Miller, Lawrence Durrell, Joseph Conrad, Lytton Strachey, T.S. Eliot, Basil Bunting, Hilaire Belloc, George Steiner, and others, as well as on many contemporary poets. Many of these works are collated in his To My Mind or Kinboats, Essays on Literature, which also came out very recently, right? Was it last week?
No, it's just in production now, but it'll be out by New Year. So yeah.
Okay, well,
thanks
and Dr. Sabah is one of the most treasured poets in residence that we have at AUD. Actually, maybe the most famous one. So thanks for
not prefixing that with "in." Thanks. Okay.
Well, okay. All right. So next we have Perla. Perla, you there?
Yes.
Hi, Perla, and welcome back. We had Perla with us during our open mic event in June, which was our first virtual open mic. Perla Kantarjian is an Armenian writer, journalist, editor, and instructor of literature and journalism residing in Beirut. Her writings have been published on various platforms, both print and online. The most recent include Rusted Radishes, Wal Qalam, An-Nahar newspaper, The Armenian Weekly, and Bookster. Kantarjian also works as a freelance copywriter and flow arts performer. Welcome again, Perla.
Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you with us as well.
All right. So, okay, I think it's time for me to read the poem. I'm going to share my screen so you guys have somewhere to rest your eyes on while I'm reading. So my poem is called Slower Than Moontide. And here it goes. The never-ending, ever-changing search for delight overrides my transient bed of roses. And the sensation of discontent hits me like a fleshy wave, and I must escape, must urge the zephyr to make haste. Quick, now. I must stir movement and exude sentences as long and as meaningful as rivers, falling down my fluid spine as I move about the filaments of civilization. I must hurry into my finesse. I must be provoked before my time comes. I am entangled and tickled by the pulps of all things alive and cryptic. Find me in the midst of the telluric tides, earthbound and brewing, my electricity growing, my hair inches longer, disemboweling shells of walnuts naked, acorns, conifer cones, in search of bread and home. Find me swept away into the elixir of their ripened dance, this tribe of daisies rising towards the sun, their only god, the paddings of their celestial faces, lukewarm beneath my fingers, like buttercream softening upon my tongue. Rose petals, bird cherries, sweet violet, you take me back to my song of stillness among all this rush.
Lovely. Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Lovely poem. Yeah.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much.
And now we will listen to the poetry of Dr. Hedi Habra. Hedi is one of our most treasured contributors as well. And she will be reading from her book, The Taste of the Earth, which will be reviewed in the forthcoming issue of the journal. Hedi is a poet, artist, and essayist. She has authored 3 poetry collections, most recently The Taste of the Earth, winner of the Silver Nautilus Book Award, honorable mention for the Eric Hoffer Book Award, and finalist for the Best Book Award. Tea in Heliopolis won the Best Book Award, and Under Breaststrokes was finalist for the International Book Award. Her story collection, Flying Carpets, won the Arab American Book Award's honorable mention and was finalist for the Eric Hoffer Award. A 16-time nominee for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net, her multilingual work appears in numerous journals and anthologies. Her website is www.hedihabra.com. Hedi, a pleasure and an honor to have you again with us.
Thank you, Rula. The honor is mine. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm enjoying this evening. For me, it's the morning. But the Indelible evening reading so much more than I have time to write on the chat. I will be reading one poem from The Taste of the Earth. And thank you very much for reviewing it for the next issue.
Pleasure. This is a wonderful collection.
Thank you. And as we were talking at the beginning about going back to roots, this book attempts to go back to myths and cultural roots and origins. But I will be reading a section that is dedicated to the crushed hopes of the Arab Spring. And since this book was like 12 years in the making, this is reflecting a situation that was going on in 2011, but in some ways it is still timely because as we can see in Lebanon, the demonstrations are also ongoing. So the poem I'm going to read is titled, I'd like to write a song of freedom. The daily news defies me, as does the almanac, when early signs of spring sprout in Egypt and Lebanon. Budding with innocence, walls rise, crushing voices with indifference. I'd like to write a song of freedom, a song of songs, merging the dialects of my youth into one heart, and share the lush ruby red arrows of Phoenician apples. Syllables fall off the table, lie formless all over the floor, powerless, unable to unite. How could they concoct an elixir of hope when time and again in the land of milk and honey, fear settles in its motto in streets steeped in carmine ink, where shades wander forever haunting the sight of their bloodshed. Unable to decipher the elusive pattern of unuttered words cluttered between my temples, a heavy armor pressed against my chest, I only feel the lift and pause of the waves surrounding silence. Will I ever learn the language of invisible scars tattooed all over my skin? Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you so much, Hedy. It was marvelous, as always. And next, Dr. Alan Hickman. Alan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. So, hi, Alan. Dr. Hickman is a poet and essayist who has been teaching English, literature, and composition at AUD for the past 7 years. Is it 7 only?
This is the 8th year.
8th, okay. His interests are music, film, and travel. He received his PhD in English from the University of Arkansas in 1990. Alan, are you going to be singing your poem tonight?
No, no.
Okay.
My sinuses exploded last night. I can barely speak.
Oh,
but,
sorry about that.
But it's an ekphrastic poem, if that helps. This is called Betrayal, Portrayal. And it references this picture. I don't know if you can see it. Okay. This is a portrait somebody drew of me when I was in high school.
Oh,
anyway.
That's you.
That's me. Yeah, with hair, you know, you have to imagine. Anyway, it's a wonder the picture didn't age and I stay young. Stowed away in a closet for 30 years, the perfect metaphor. A life of compromise and disappointment stretched and framed. I'd forgotten all about it. The day Bill Pratt took charcoal in hand and froze time. A good likeness, at least in part. I still think he got the mouth wrong. And there's something tentative about the chin. Perhaps he got bored, painting picture after picture for our senior class. But the eyes, as the Brits say, are spot on. If they don't quite follow you around the room, and it's the only drawing I have, unless you count the caricature tossed off by a Thai sketch artist at a dinner table in Bangkok some 20 years on. I could have done without that one. Bill himself is dead now, or so I've heard, never having attained fame. No more have I. He was voted most talented by his classmates. I had to settle for Student of the Month, April at its cruelest. In those days, the future was set in stone. The moment it was that got out of hand, like the time I made a U-turn and crashed the VW. 3 of us escaped unharmed. Bill numbered among the charmed ones, his dad a bird colonel, to whose exalted company I aspired. Yet all I can recall of our friendship is mixing up a batch of sangria in the unused maid's quarters above my family's flat in Ockham. Looking back now, I can't help but feel a bit shy about my former self. He seemed so confident, assured, if not quite the silk hat on the Bradford millionaire. Well, you get the point. But given all that hasn't happened in the intervening decades, I think maybe I owe them both, Bill and his art, an explanation.
Lovely. Thank you, Alan. Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Okay, so our next poet, I'm not sure if he's here yet, Dr. Frank Darwish. Frank, are you here? No, he's not on the list. He's not on the name list of attendees. So we will move to Carly, Dr. Carly J. Brown.
Hello.
Hi, Carly. Carly gave a wonderful, wonderful session, a wonderful reading from her latest collection that was very engaging. She got lots of wonderful comments from the students, and even after the event, so many students were asking about you again. They were like, when are we going to have Carly again? Aww. So there you are with us one more time, hopefully not the last time. And we're very happy that you are with us here today, Carly. Now, for those of you who do not know Carly Brown, Carly, I'm looking for your bio, sorry.
No worries. I'm really happy to hear that the students so enjoyed the performance. I enjoyed it as well.
They sure did. Dr. Carly Brown is an author, poet, and teacher based in Edinburgh, Scotland. She is a winner of Scotland's National Poetry Slam and represented Scotland at the World Series of Slam Poetry in Paris, where she ranked 4th in the world. She has also performed at dozens of festivals and events, including Glastonbury Festival, Stanza Poetry Festival, and the Edinburgh Fringe. She is also co-creator of best-selling children's picture book, I Love St. Andrews, which explores the quirky history and colorful traditions of the town. An author of poetry pamphlets, Grown Up Poetry Needs to Leave Me Alone, and Anastasia, Look in the Mirror. Carly is currently working on a historical novel set during the Revolutionary War, which was longlisted for the 2019 Dyslexia Novel Award. Carly also volunteers as a tour guide and historical reenactor at the Georgian House. Carly, welcome back again. We are very happy to have you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rula. Thank you so much for having me again. I've so loved hearing all of these poems and even songs from all over the world. So I'm so delighted and privileged to be here. So thanks so much for the wonderful work everyone has shared. I'm going to be sharing one of the poems that will be in the upcoming issue of Indelible. And this is another ekphrastic work. We've heard some wonderful ekphrastic poems, so I'm going to share an ekphrastic poem too. So this is a poem inspired by a painting from a Scottish painter called Samuel Peploe, and the painting is called Luxembourg Gardens from 1910, and the poem is called French. And it's from my newest pamphlet, Anastasia, Look in the Mirror. French. French purrs like a white cat in the sun window and rasps like cigarette throats after boozy nightclubs, a language of audacity and elegance. We learned early how to conjugate, adding EZ and E depending on the subject, tacking endings onto verbs, like hats. Ask me anything. Is the Louvre nearby? Oui. Descendez cette rue et toi. I will drop words in your palm like chocolat. We can spend all day with our mouths around vowels, tossing R's off our tongues in bursts of sweet air. But when they took me to the Jardin des Tuileries, nobody asked me for my words. I held them in the folds of my English skirt, gazing up at flamboyant trees, the grass lit with flowers and everything swaying, no firm edges like the language I wanted to speak. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Lovely, lovely poem.
It was lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. So I guess this is it for our guests, and you guys are left with me right now. I will be reading a poem called Word Searching, which is in my new collection, which should be released by mid-January. And it's called Simply Being. The collection is called Simply Being, published by Chiron Press. So this is how the poem goes. Now, this poem also is about language. It's about writing, actually, searching for the right word, the right expression to salvage or to assuage the state that we are in during lockdown. This was written during the early lockdown days. Eyes bob up and down, typewriter left and right, before landing on the right tile in this visual hopscotch, on a hunt for some mysterious page sprites. Somehow, life is all a big game of words, a hide and seek, a constant search for the right term. Like homing pigeons, they teleport thought bundles, wish envelopes, and crystallizations of unkempt feelings across ears and minds. They knock on the door of the left frontal lobe and wait to be let in. And suddenly they wonder, like Goldilocks, between the voice and the breath, the intention and the meaning, which one is just right? But what is that word for the word again? That mythos, rendering us all gods in our own epics. The jouissance continues. Found it. Thank you. That was pretty short.
Nicely read.
Thank you. And now I'm going to open the floor for the audience and also for the poets who would like to comment or ask questions on any of the poems that were read. Thank you. Thank you all for the lovely comments. So, oh, Rowan has a question. Yes, go ahead, Rowan. You may use the mic.
Yeah. I actually genuinely wanted to know this since, like, I'm a writer and I love to write from time to time when I feel inspired. Now, usually what inspires me is some disaster that happened, but I genuinely want to ask, since there are some very experienced poets here, it's pretty clear. What is it that inspires you to write the next word? Like, how do you think about that? Like, is it some, how do I say it? Like, the vision that comes to you? Like, what comes to mind when you choose the next word or you choose the next line? I'm actually pretty curious.
Okay, is your question addressed to anyone specific?
No, in general.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Rowan, for your question. Who would like to answer?
Well, I could say something, I suppose. In terms of what inspired me to write the next word, I mean, the way I see it is that most of the time, personally and in general, I think, poets both follow the words and the words follow them. There's this dynamic loop back between, at least a poet like me, who's kind of guided by his ear as much as anything else, by the simplest words, but just their music. So that, in a way, sometimes you write a sentence or a line or what have you, and it's the thing, or at least 80% that determines the next line. And that might sound very fatalistic and boring, but that's kind of how it works sometimes. And then obviously there's also a dynamic of you know, intervening in that process and adding your own sense of adventure into it. But there's an interesting thing, I think, what's interesting, there's this idea of, you know, the irrational. I think it's Wallace Stevens has this notion of the irrational, that, you know, when you follow a line of thought or a line of, or description or whatever it is, that is like the focus or center of a poem, there's always, I suppose, in a great poem, which I've never written, but I know obviously famous poets have, there's this element of the surprise that is just kind of, it fits perfectly, but actually at the same time came out of a vacuum that no one could have predicted, you know? So I think the way I think of it is two ways of answering that question. Firstly, you know, a certain type of poet like me who follows his ear and kind of has words in his blood, as it were, you know, it's half the time you're following the words and you're not guiding them, and then half the time you're doing it, you're guiding the words. But also the idea that, you know, in both those processes, there always has to be this magic element of surprise that you yourself never expected, but somehow fits perfectly. Not some sort of like bombastic kind of insertion, but you are so surprised, but actually it works perfectly. You know, that's the kind of magic, I think, at times that a good poem or a great poem can be done, I think, anyway. I hope that's interesting or something worth listening to.
I absolutely agree with that thing about surprise. I kind of think it's, for me, it's like, poetry is like laying eggs. You suddenly feel broody and then something happens. And there is a quality to it that I don't know where it comes from, but I know that I have to write at that particular point. And it's no good trying to write it at another time That's how it works for me. I can't, I'm not a mason chipping away at it. I can't do it in that way. It just doesn't work for me. But other poets, you know, are great craftsmen. I mean, Dylan Thomas, who was a great craftsman, everybody thinks it came very easily to him. It didn't come easily to him. He spent hours over every word, and yet it appears to be spontaneous. So I think everybody has a different way of tapping in somehow. I don't know quite, but it is mysterious, as you say. It's a surprising thing. I don't understand it myself. Really.
But, you know, I do think, I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but I want to engage with that idea of, you know, the craftsmanship, which involves, you know, the Dylan Thomas working away. You know, I'm sure that, I mean, Dylan Thomas is Dylan Thomas. There are some amazing poets and great poets and so on who do that. But from my personal perspective, not being a great poet, but anyway, I can't do that. As soon as I know I'm 20 minutes into nicking away at a poem, I know I've lost all hope. I mean, I might as well kill myself because theoretically it'll never end, and practically wherever you do end will never be good enough. You know, so sometimes I think I try. Most of the time, for me, a poem comes out. It's never going to be perfect, but I'll give myself maybe 20 minutes to change a little bit, tweak it, just to make it musically better. But that's it. You know, if I'm spending a day or longer on a poem, unless it's kind of coming back after a month at a poem quickly. But if you're talking about like continuous work over days, from my personal perspective alone, it never works. You know, I've ruined everything, you know, and it was probably ruined before I even started ruining it. So that's, you know, my perspective on it. I mean, yeah.
You know, one thing, it's funny, my 9-year-old, Rafaela, she had to write a story, a sequel to a story that they read in school. So I asked her what she was going to write about, and her answer was, "I'll know when I start writing." And, you know, I thought about that. I was like,
that's a very wise thing to say.
Yes, this is how it happens. I mean, oftentimes we plan what we want to write about, whether it's a poem, whether it's a story, whether we're cooking, we end up, you know, adding things to the recipe. So this is how a creative work starts. You start it, but you don't know where it takes you. So there is this element of surprise, and there is this element of being transported by the art itself. So, you know, I just thought, yes, that was very wise. Go ahead, start writing, and let me know when you're finished what you wrote about. So yeah, this is how it happens.
You know, I was thinking, whenever I teach poetry, I always say it's like the fear of rejection. If you think that you can get everything planned in your head and wait for the right moment to start, well, it's like the fear of rejection. You know, you wait around for the perfect moment and it never comes. You end up missing an opportunity. It's the same thing with writing, I think. If you're waiting for everything to get perfect ahead of time, firstly, it'll never happen. And secondly, even if you did, it's going to change as soon as you start writing. So, you know, this idea that mind precedes, that, you know, that your intentions are kind of preceding the whole work is nonsense, I think, especially with poetry, which is so much more word, prolific rather than maybe prose, which can be a bit more planned out, you know. So I do think that, yeah, I think your daughter Rafaela was onto the truth there, that you don't know where you're going 100% until you're on the way.
She could have said it simply, you know. She was like,
That ought to be,
when I start.
That ought to be at the beginning of every poetry lecture that's ever given. It's the most wise thing I've ever heard anyone say about poetry, practically.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, never.
Yeah.
Piggyback on that, I would say that these days, it's not just I'll know when I write, it'll be I'll know as I write.
Yeah.
When I first started out, and including the poem I read today, I always had an idea that I wanted to get across, and I didn't know necessarily how I would do that. Sometimes I did. If it was overly that way, it was a terrible poem. But when I set out to write For Therapy, I Mix Metaphors, I really had an idea there, and I wanted to complete the idea however it might come out. Well, that was several years ago, many years ago. And now I'm much more like your daughter. I have no idea what I'm going to write. And when I finish a line, I have no idea what the next line is. And I don't have any idea what it's all going to add up to. However, I do layer on quite a bit of tinkering. once I've got the whole thing, mainly because I love to do it. Maybe I ruined the poem, I don't know. But I just have so much time, so much fun, spending lots of time picking a better word here and there, or phrasing or rhythm or something. But I would also second Omar in that my ear guides me as much as idea, as much as image. Ear is really very important in my poems. When I look back at the early ones, I see it was important then, and I didn't particularly know that, but now I know it.
Well, I noticed that in your poem you read today, because I think there were, from the first few lines, there were some internal rhymes that weren't, I didn't seem they were chosen, but they just came off. You know, you were in a way, naturally your ear was kind of creating these assonances between, in the middle of the line between earlier lines. I can't remember the exact ones, but I remember noticing it and thinking, you know, obviously, you know, your ear has guided you through these lines, you know, at least half of it anyway. So, yeah.
One of my mentors is Marvin Bell, and I don't know if you know him or know of him. And by the way, he's dying of cancer now, which is very sad. He's in his 80s. Anyway, his great thing that I learned from him is that no matter what you write, your obsessions come through. So for example, he's a great one to write to a prompt. He'll challenge anybody. Give me, you know, a dozen words, I'll write a poem. And he's really good at it. Of course, he's a great poet. But, and he would say, no matter what words you give me, no matter where I'm going with it, my obsessions come out. And when he looks back on it, he can see, oh yeah, that's a Marvin poem right there. And so one of my obsessions, I would say, without knowing it at first, was this ear thing.
You know, but can I say one more thing quickly? Sorry, guys, I know I'm hogging the microphone, but there's an interesting concept. I wrote a book recently, as Urula mentioned, on a famous poet who's a friend of mine, Fiona Sampson. And in some of her theoretical work, her kind of work in poetics, she talks about poetry as being, you know, there's something meaningful, which is musical, about poetry that is before any particular phoneme or word. That the music, I mean, obviously in biographies, you read of these famous poets who have musical inklings. So they have a biographical instinct, you know, they have this emotion, they have a musical ear, and they want to produce music. But she means more structurally, that poetry itself is something before and beyond the poem itself. And yet without the poem itself, it wouldn't exist. So in a way, there's this kind of beautiful asymmetry that in a way, a poem, poetry doesn't exist unless there's one poem at least. And there have been probably billions, I don't know. But poetry is not reducible to all the poems past, present, and to come. There's also this kind of, as it were, transcendental element that's kind of behind every single poem, but not reducible to all the poems that have been produced. And I think that taps into what you're talking about in terms of the ear, and in terms of what you're talking about your friend. Sorry, I'm not well-versed in his poetry, but the idea that there's an element about a poem, whether it's biographical or structural, that is more than all the words added up. You know, that there is something, this kind of more, this element of more, which is not, you know, you can't really prove it, but it's there. It's there every time, whether it's an individual level or in, you know, a more theoretical kind of poetry in general level. Yeah. You know, I think you can call it God even, grace or plenitude or whatever it is you want to call it. You use any placeholder concept, but there is something about poetry that is more than just the words added up together, obviously. I think we all know this instinctually, but, you know, she talks about it in interesting ways in some of her theoretical work, which it was on my mind because it was, you know, recently published, so.
Right. Christine, Chris Murray would like to add something, and then Danya would also like to add something. So Chris?
Okay, also there were two things. I think that poetry requires constant work and constant practice. And from my point of view, I always see writing as a way that the poet interprets and confronts the world and the mysteries around them. And I think you have to be constantly open and to your influences. I work directly from image, so I wouldn't work from ear But I wanted to read something really, really brief about what Yvonne Boland said about young poets, because it's something, the difference between the poet and the painter. She said that most young poets have bad working habits. They write their poems in fits or starts by feast or famine, but painters follow the light. They wait for it and they do their work by it. I think that poet can be kind of ephemeral, and that a lot of young poets are kind of just waiting around. I think you have to be constantly practicing. I think you have to be constantly working with your inspiration, and I think it's something that it becomes more natural as you progress. So I'd be looking at it from the aspect of maybe an emerging poet and how to do it. You sit and you write, you could write 12 pages of crap, but you might find one sentence that will bring you into the poem. So I think it's something that you have to constantly work at. So that would be my opinion on that.
Right.
I think that's true. I think sensitization is the key to all art, in the sense that, you know, once you know that there's no kind of hard science objective, you know, this is art, this is not art. But then that's not the same thing as saying anything goes. Obviously, we all know that as practitioners of an art. So that sliding middle ground, which you can't actually pin down and prove, is actually a sensibility that's being sensitized and getting the kind of where instinct meets practice sort of thing. I think that's what you're talking about. And so I think, yeah, I think I'm a teacher and Rula's a teacher. Sorry, Christine, I don't know if you, I can't remember from your bio whether you teach. I apologize for that. But what I was going to say was that teaching, you know, writing is very much about letting a student or an emerging writer kind of go through the experience beyond any particular word or sentence or page he or she may write, because that experience will actually be the setup, maybe 10 years away or 10 minutes away, for their first amazing line, you know. So it's kind of, it's this invisible element, but it does exist, you know, because I really don't believe that once you say there's no objectivity in art, which there isn't, that therefore it's completely, you know, slippery slope subjective. I don't think it can be, because we all think that there's good poems and bad poems, or better and worse and so on. So there's obviously got to be something that you can kind of talk about as a way of understanding how we make judgments. Otherwise, you know, why would we, you know, I mean, if I want to find out about a Rembrandt painting, I'd prefer a professor who studied Rembrandt for 20 years than someone randomly I bring off the street. That might sound very elitist, but I think it's true. I just think it's
absolutely true. I mean, going back to what Christine was saying, I absolutely agree about the working, but I also think the reading of poetry, the reading of a whole range of different poems, some that you don't actually necessarily like, is actually good practice. So, you know, when I'm in the mood, I try to read people, not just my go-to poets, but people who are writing in a different style, at a different time, in a totally different way. And I do think the reading of poetry is really helpful in the practice of writing poetry, you know, and see, as you were saying, looking at a great Rembrandt, you might think you'll know, you know, that's something unattainable, but there's something in that picture that might inspire you to go away and paint, you know, and the same is true of great poetry, really, and great poets, certainly.
Yeah, I remember when I first read H.D., who would be one of my favorite poets.
Mine too.
Trying to work out what she was doing, you know, and it's very important to do that. You have to expose yourself to a wide range of poetry reading and to write all the time, or as much as you can, because it will come, you know, and you work from the image or from what you've written to achieve the poem.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I had a point to add, actually, after Christine's. I wholeheartedly agree about the point of practice, actually, and I am not a professional poet or as experienced as any of our guests here, who have obviously a lot more expertise than me in this matter. But I just wanted to say something about it, because I am someone who personally don't actually believe that I do feel the magic of inspiration. Sometimes, in my perspective, I feel like my work, I'm only ever really happy with it once it's beyond done, or I think of it as I only think I'm inspired when I'm performing a song sometimes, rather than even during the process of writing it. I'm never pleased with it. And this isn't just a matter of self-criticism, it's just me personally. I never find myself actually experiencing the magic of inspiration. And I think a lot of people struggle with that sometimes when we hear the idea that there is something more to it. We're sometimes maybe pushing a little bit too hard for that and just struggle maybe to be able to actually work through the writing process when that doesn't happen. I think it does happen, like Christine said, with a lot of practice. It's just like instinctually you begin to maybe think and understand that certain ideas are very workable. I don't actually think that that's necessarily something completely outside of one's experience and maybe existing within some sort of unknowable space. I think that is actually related to a level of skill that is instinctual. And for me, when it comes to writing of any kind, especially I think with my songs, I feel like the most important thing for me is practice, and also just to maybe to acknowledge that not every idea might sound appealing just from the get-go as well. Because a lot of times when I am looking for something to write, the first thing I do is just think that every idea is terrible. So I think the best thing to do, especially because I am somebody who's just starting out and doesn't really have as much expertise to go on instinct a lot of the time, I think that it's just important to know that there isn't really such a thing as an idea maybe that isn't workable, even if there's a sense of lack of inspiration. I think that everything has its path, and sometimes I end up loving my work long after I've just hated it for a long time. And I just think that I probably was in a bad place when I was writing some things that I felt were very uninspired, or I didn't think had the potential. So I think just maybe revisiting thoughts as well, where I felt like I didn't have something that was driving me even through it, except for this potential idea that I didn't really like, and then I kept working through in different ways until I just abandoned it. And I think that just something maybe important just to think that sometimes you're not really the best judge of yourself as well, and maybe it is important to forego the idea that an inspiration will always come, and just give it a chance, maybe, is kind of something I probably would tell a lot of my friends as well, who are just sort of budding writers and songwriters. And that's just a more, I guess, perspective on maybe when it comes to just feeling like we're not connected with the inspiration. I think that's just a point I wanted to give, maybe as a sort of counter to some of the feelings or the thoughts that the other expert poets here have shared on the more inspired side of things. So
thank you, Danya. It's always great to hear different perspectives on the same art. So, you know, different poets speaking about their different experiences with poetry, despite the fact that we meet at so many points as well. Sam wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to this kind of idea of following your ear, and kind of that instinctual factor that kind of runs through each poem, where you can't really deduce, or that if you start picking away at a poem, then you're still left with something that's kind of, to use a big word, it has to do with like aesthetic sensibility. But I don't think it's necessarily about sensitizing yourself. I think it's more about defamiliarizing each word. At least in my experience, that's been the case, because I'm always lost between this tension of like the kind of stereotypical dramatic inspiration of getting like this brilliant idea that sounds like musical and wonderful, and then at the same time having to construct something and kind of put it into terms and forms that I think might communicate the idea a lot better. And I think in that between spot is kind of where the actual poetry happens. It's when I never overdo the kind of theoretical frameworks and such, while also trying to maintain the integrity of that first moment of inspiration. And what that comes down to in practice is actually getting stuck at every single word. Because if it starts with a sentence, then that sentence has given me the premise of it has kind of laid the foundation of this small world that I'm going to construct with this poem. And I don't necessarily know it. It is an idea of like a process of discovery, but it's not so much that I don't have any control over it, because, you know, this idea of your obsession comes through, I think really informs the process of writing in the sense that I will definitely always find some words more delicious than others, or kind of more like appealing, or more let's say they have a better aesthetic quality to kind of fit in there. But at the same time, there is this notion of being too flowery, and so there's always this attempt to kind of strike a balance between those two points of being like either professionally trained or classically trained, and then also kind of remembering this very childlike innocence and spirit in kind of looking at something and wanting to talk about it or describe it, or like lift it up onto on a platform and kind of look at it and describe it to others.
Yeah,
I think Sam, you know, I like the word you defamiliarize, you know, kind of slightly alienate the language so that you get something that really does kind of pick out what you want perfectly, but also is not predictable or kind of too predictable, as it were. But, you know, I mean, especially with British poetry, which I'm a bit more familiar with, and, you know, I read more British poetry than I have other kinds of poetry. And often enough, you find some of the greatest poets defamiliarize their readers, kind of shock them into a new track of thought, a new emotion, a new perspective on whatever it is. But they don't do it by kind of bombastic linguistic ways. They do it in the most subtly simple ways, by phrasing, you know, something quite simply, but in the right order or the right kind of dynamic order, whatever it is. So that it doesn't, I mean, so I think the question of defamiliarization doesn't necessarily have to be about words, but can be about the whole conception, you know, like the kind of the you know, in a way, I suppose you know, what insight you want to get across perhaps from a poem, you know. But I think you're right, yeah, there has to be this balance, but it doesn't always have to be about the particular word, you know. You can actually, I think so anyway. I mean, that's some of my impressions at the times.
I think your voice, the thing about it, I absolutely agree, but I think you really need to be true to your voice. It's when you try to be something other than you are in the way that you write that you come undone. There are certain things that I like to think are in the way I write, but when once you can find some kind of authenticity in your voice and not try to be somebody else or something else, or to please other people, or to write poetry in the grand manner, I think that's when you will be more content and more able to work, or I find it much easier to work on that basis. I know that if I'm trying to be too grandiose or try to talk about things I've got no actual understanding of, then it just ends up like an empty bucket rattling around, making noise, you know. And so I think discovering what your actual authentic voice is about in. So once you know it, it's a bit like I don't know. It's a bit. I think it's a bit like finding a perfect pitch musically or whatever. But you will know, I think, when you're at that place. And it's not saying one should be complacent once you've reached that stage, but it's about being okay about it, I think. I would, you know, complacency is no good, but just finding comfort in having found a voice that's actually is real to you. I think it's really important.
I would like to share with you just a very small epitaph of my upcoming collection, because I think it kind of sums up my understanding of this discussion very well. It goes, read with the voices of your forebears and they will answer you. Read with the voice of your heart and it will tell your eye and show your ear.
Lovely. Spot on, actually. This is exactly. It resonates very well with what was said. So, folks, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. It was wonderful, and this could just go on and on and on. I mean, we couldn't get enough of this. The talk, the poetry, it was wonderful. And it really makes everything about the pandemic easier when we could all meet together through poetry and through our platform. So again, I mean, I don't feel that this is, and I know many of you feel the same way, it doesn't feel like this is a journal and these are the contributors. It feels like one organic whole. I mean, we are growing as a community with time. I've met many of you through Twitter, through Facebook, through pure serendipity. It's wonderful. I mean, we've all met for a reason, and we are all here together tonight for a reason as well. And I'm very happy to have you all. And please feel free to, again, to continue this discussion over Facebook, over Twitter. As I said, we are a community, or even on Indelible, the journal itself. The journal should be released on the 20th of December. Hopefully, I will send you the proofs a few days before, just to make sure that everything is done correctly. And we will meet again in January, at some point after everybody settles in, back again after the holidays. So after mid-January, we would go back to our online events. And we will have another launch event for our fiction writers, and also one for our nonfiction writers. So we've got some great essays, some great short stories and pieces of flash fiction coming up. We also have a wonderful interview with one of the best writers. I'm not going to tell you who she is. Well, you know it's a she right now, but the feature interview is a very, very interesting one. So stay tuned and keep an eye on the next issue. And hopefully we'll meet again soon in 2021, which is only a few weeks from now. So have a good night or a great day ahead. I greatly enjoyed your company. This was wonderful. And I know that we do this very often. So I look forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you, Rula.
Thank you, Rula. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rula.
Thank you, Rula.
Thank you.
Thank
you all.
you all. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.